Hey there, Eurus here, and welcome to Community Life. Here we talk with the amazing humans from the community world about their life journeys and learn from each other. And today we have a conversation with Margaux Miller, a global community builder, a remote work ambassador with love of travels and exploration, TEDx speaker with the Gremlin energy, MC, an avid hiker, and an exciting person to talk to. So, hello, Margaux.
Hey, how are you?
Finally, it's been forever. I don't remember when was exactly that we connected on LinkedIn, but as Taylor Harrington once told, it's kind of like friend flirting, like it's always here and there, it's always some kind of connections, but it's never the real life conversation. It's still not kind of real life conversation, but here we are. So super happy to finally see you. And you passed with distinction the Wine and Spirit Education Trust Level 2 award. So tell me, what is your process of ordering wine in a restaurant looks like?
Oh my gosh, what a funny first question to start with, Yuri. I love it. Okay, yeah, there was a point in time in my career where I worked for a wine cellar manufacturer. They built like the beautiful rooms that people store their wine in, and so I had to do wine education. And when I did, it certainly did change how I ordered wine in a restaurant. Honestly, there's some like really sneak tips that I can give people. But the best was when you have basic education in wine, you can then really understand what grapes typically grow the best in which countries. So even if all you take away is a high level view of, this grows well in this country, then when you're looking at the wine list, if you're picking, say, a Bordeaux from France, or someone else says that they're creating that in another country, you can kind of go, the other country version, probably a weird fake. Like the France one, probably the one that we want, right? So you can make like really quick decisions like that. So now it is a lot of fun because it's a great skill to have when you are kind of at a business meeting or you're, quickly trying to impress the people that you're with. If you can order a good bottle of wine, it's definitely a fun party trick. So basically now I just quickly look, I see what countries and what grapes go together. If there'll only be like a few that are obviously from the right country, say like a Malbec from Argentina. It's like that that's the grape that grows really well there. So you can like quickly pick. You can ask your group, do they want a certain type of wine, like are they red, white, whatever, some basic things they might want. And then you can probably pick pretty fast within that now. So it's a big like country grape match, and then you look a bit at price, and then you can make some quick decisions.
So do you look like in these movies they, saw some expert? Yeah, I'd go with this wine of this 9060 year. Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. So does it look like that?
My knowledge at this point doesn't definitely does not go deep enough to know like exact years where that vintage was the best for that winery. You have to be kind of full sommelier level. I've got my W set level 2, which is a great level to have for like the fun party trick. You know a little bit more than the average person, but certainly I'm not quite so fancy and formal when it comes to ordering wine. Although I am definitely pickier than I was before. It has made my wine budget have to increase, Yuri.
Yeah, that's how it works. And what is one thing that people do not usually know about wine?
Oh, good question. I think like one of the biggest things I learned was just around being open to other varietals, like other types of grapes. I had a really good point where the instructor explained it like a periodic table. So you think of your,
Mm.
chemistry when you took it, when you looked at your periodic table. And say like in the bottom corner, we've got the wines that everyone's really aware of. Say, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Cab Sauv, that kind of thing, Merlot, like the ones we all know. But the best tip that I have for friends now is go into a wine store, one where they have like actually educated wine people, usually those boutique wine stores, right? And then tell them what you like, but tell them that's not what you want that day. So go in and say, like, I want a Sauvignon Blanc, or I really like Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. Okay. Go in, tell them that. You already know that. That's your one you buy every weekend. Like, whatever it is, tell them. But say, I don't want that today. I want something like similar, but I want to go to a new country or I want to try something new. This is like where we bring in the periodic table where you're basically like moving over one cell and up one cell, and they're going to give you that one, right? And then the
Mm.
next time you can kind of go over and up again. And before you know it, you're drinking like, it's a funny sentence, but you're drinking the periodic table of wine in the sense of like you've gotten more creative. What that does is just like it educates you more, it opens up your palate, but it's not scary. You're not just picking some random wine way over here on the table. You're picking, two that are relatively close. So that person might say, okay, you like Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. if you move like one cell over and one cell up, let's try a Chenin Blanc, right? And so they'll give you something where it's got some of the same properties, but is a new grape that's still going to like, expand your palate a little bit. So I think that was the most fun thing I learned. Just like it's such a simple thing, but it was so along the lines of like just being able to expand what you like. And now it's a lot more fun. I can go to restaurants and, to your first question, and pick something that's a little more creative just because I've slowly moved along that table, if you think of
Hmm.
it that way.
And how to understand that this person in this shop is really experienced, not just fancy person to kind of, well, yeah, I'm an expert. I will sell you the best wine ever.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask them what education they have if you're really curious, but some people are amazingly knowledgeable and don't have deep education. I find, like, I'm based in Canada, and if you go to any of the boutique smaller wine stores, they pretty much only hire people that are knowledgeable or they train them really well. If you're going to like a basic, like large liquor store with everything, those
Mhm.
people maybe won't have the wine knowledge specifically. You might get lucky and someone does, but typically it's those small boutique stores where they do truly know. And worst case, you tell them what you want. If they really don't seem to be aware, you can probably tell. And if they're really confident and it's fake confidence, well, you tried something new and maybe you didn't love it. But like, don't buy the most expensive bottle then as you're doing this test exercise, ease your way in. Because it is, you can ask them what their education is, but ultimately, like, everyone's knowledge is going to vary.
And what is your favorite wine?
It varies depending on time of year. Right now, funny enough, I am into an Austrian wine by the Renner sisters called Super Glitzer. So it's like a very funny name, but we found it in the summer and it's just been, it has a bit of like effervescence to it, but it's a red wine. It's a light, like if people know a Pinot Noir, it's light like that, but it's a different grape. And it's from Austria, and I never would have thought. And the reason I found it was because I went to the store and said, I want this, but a little different. And they pointed me to this Austrian wine because I didn't even really know they made that good of wine in Austria. And so then I learned and I learned all about it. And then we started trying more and more. And so it became this fun thing. And it was with my dad and my brother that we did this. And now my whole family is into Austrian wine currently. So, but it's going to change, right? Like that's just our current season.
Yeah, you just the next time you are stepping just one cell up and one cell in another direction. So you never know when you might where you might end like next year. So
Exactly.
so let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your parents. Who are they?
Wow, what a question, Yuri. This is so interesting. You asked me things that people don't usually ask. I have fabulous parents. My parents are still together. They've been together for 30 some odd years, up top numbers of 30s. I think 30, 37, 38 up there. They're gonna make fun of me when I get that wrong. But they're up there. And they are like, it's interesting as you get older. I think you realize how interesting your parents are. I think you don't give them very much credit when you're younger and you think they're uncool. But my parents were really had a love of travel that I didn't quite like clock until we were older. When we were 15 and 14, my brother and I, they took us to Australia for a year. And again, we're Canadian. So we moved to Australia for a year and we went to school there. My mom switched jobs with a teacher out there. My dad just took different jobs that he could based on like the visa that we had. And that's pretty brave to move your young kids middle of high school, junior high over somewhere else. And like, the effort that that takes to do that. When I think now about myself and trying to live other places, even just solo, I see the work that that takes for visas and everything, right? And so you kind of look back as an older person and go, oh wow, that was amazing what they actually gave us because it really instilled in us a love of travel and exploration and meeting new people. And we can start using that word community, right? But it's like we really were able to integrate with groups of people that weren't our normal people at home. And obviously Australia is pretty easy because it's still English first language, right? So there wasn't that barrier. But it still was. We were in a small town. We had no friends going in. We were teenagers where everyone was like, had their friends starting their little cliques and stuff. So it's a good challenge for us. We can talk about that more later. But so my parents were, my mom was a teacher her whole career. My dad varied a little bit more, which is a little more similar to me in the sense of like not necessarily picking like one perfect path. But they're definitely people who are very curious. They have a curiosity for the world. They cook different dishes from different places. Again, something I did not recognize when we were younger at all. Later in life now, we definitely look back and think, wow, they really raised us in a way where we were curious, open to other people, respectful of people of different ages and able to talk to kind of different people of different backgrounds and different ages. We grew up with like a cabin in the woods kind of in where we are in Canada. It's very popular. So you spend your summers in this kind of cabin area. People have like lake houses and stuff. And some of them are just like wood cabins. They're not fancy necessarily. But and then we have obviously our place in the city, like our normal everyday where we go to school. So that was a big part of our upbringing, and there was no like electricity out there. So again, they really raised us to like we didn't have technology, really devices like back then. Maybe a Game Boy, right? It was like all you had, and the battery died, and that was it. And so we were really like conversation with our parents at the table constantly, or like playing outside and really like helping around the property and stuff was all a part of our upbringing. So amazing parents really gave us a lot. And my mom is French Canadian, so we also got that second language and some of that French culture, which is really cool too.
When did you start rediscovering your parents?
That's a great question. And I think, yeah, that was what I was alluding to there. Probably not until I was in my late 20s. It's funny how I think sometime in your 20s, you could have done it sooner probably, but I think maybe you're just a little too self-absorbed, like as you're finishing university and trying to figure out what you want. And, it's kind of still a little bit more about you. I think once you have a little more pause is maybe when you have an opportunity to do that. But yeah, definitely not until late 20s did I look at them and go, oh, wow, you're pretty cool. And you gave us a lot. And oh, that's where that quality I have comes from.
I'm curious, what made you think that? I mean, like, what sparked this interest to rediscover your parents?
I wonder. This is a question I haven't necessarily thought of, but I do remember when my dad turned 70 and we were at the lake and like this lake house that I'm talking about where we don't, not a lot of technology, you're really spending time with each other. And I saw them. This is a funny story because it's a little bit funny to say, but I don't remember seeing my parents like kissing a lot when I was young. And I saw them kissing in the corner of the cabin. And I thought, wow, like they have this love for each other at, my dad being 70 years old, like, and it's still showing and they still have that. And I think I remember thinking like, wow, what an amazing thing to have. It'd be so great to have that kind of love that, almost seems to be getting stronger with age. And I think it's like moments like that where you kind of go, oh, that's something I want. How did they achieve that? And then you start to like look backwards and then kind of look internally, maybe a bit of that. Also, like we took a trip with our parents as adults. My brother and I went to a family friend wedding in Germany before the pandemic. So maybe like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And we used to go on trips as a family much more when we were younger. And then again, you get to an age where people have their own partners and they start to grow, with their own kind of families or partners and friends. And then you kind of go on your own holidays without your parents in the same way, right? Like obviously when you're a kid, you're traveling with them. So there's this big gap. And then we did this trip. And I think that too, like, we were in Germany, like going to an outdoor like beer hall kind of thing with our parents. And just realizing like they're people too and they enjoy all this same stuff, on top of being your parents. So I think except for a few moments like that we were really lucky to have that really kind of make you stop and go, they've offered us a lot.
What kind of curiosity do you have?
I have, when people describe me often, like friends and family, or even if I take quizzes, personality tests and stuff like that, one of the criteria that always comes up for me at the top, again, like if people are describing me or if I take these tests, is often a quality that is referred to as having a zest for life. And it's such a nice term. I really love it that people, that it was starting to be used for me because I think it's so nice. But I have a zest for life, I think, in general, Yuri. So I think I'm curious about a lot of things. Like I travel a ton now and I really try and stay places for a long time. I'm typically not jumping around like every 2 days because I'm truly curious to understand what it's like to live there, what that community is like, what the people are like. I think, one of the cool things you learn through that too is that there's actually so much similarity between so many of us in different areas of the world, despite us wanting to think that there are these like patriotic differences. Humans are innately very similar. But so curiosity for the world, travel, food, but people. Like I'm really happy to meet any kind of person and truly try and get to know them. I really like connecting people too. And so I think I have a curiosity there. I think with, career and personal growth, I'm very curious. I'm often reading books or podcasts, listening to podcasts about, ways to improve personally and professionally, whether that's like health and wellness or intellectually or career-wise or relationships, I'm often not listening to music if I'm in commute. I'm always, in fact, almost never. I'm pretty much always consuming some kind of like learning content, whether that's a podcast or a book. And that's maybe in the last, like not when I was super young, but definitely in the last, I don't know, 15 years or however long I can remember. So it's been, I think there's just like that constant curiosity. And I think with that, a lack of judgment. I'm really curious about people and the decisions they're making in life and not with judgment involved. I really want to know, like if you meditate every single day and you believe in, chakras and maybe someone else doesn't, it's like what does that give you? And I just try and ask a lot of questions. I'm just very curious, like in general, why are you doing it? What does it give you? How do you do it? Like, should I do it? What would that give me? Every time I've learned about some new way of living, I find myself wanting to learn more. But Yuri, it's funny because it's a good quality, but it's also really tough sometimes because I feel like the more I learn about the ways we can live our lives, because there's so many options, right? The more that I find myself at a crossroads, like trying to figure out almost the meaning of life, because the more you see different ways, the more you go, well, should I be doing it that way or that way? It almost becomes tough being a curious person in a way.
How do you choose what action to take?
I'm a little bit of a like go with it action kind of person. I'm not as much as I'm like listening to all this stuff and learning, I'm not necessarily like perfectly analyzing something before deciding to move forward. I think partly it depends obviously like what kind of question and action we're talking about. But I think like if something feels right innately, because you already have all this bank of knowledge, right? And so then I think that to some degree I'm going off of like what feels like the right next move.
I recently started reading this book, Wim Hof Method, when like he called an Iceman and this crazy person who like can, stay for hours in ice and it's still okay for him. But I learned from him to take a cold shower, and I really like, one sentence that cold shower a day keeps doctors away. And another one thing that he has his breathing technique. So it's something that I'm trying, like I'm pretty much like in your way that you are describing. So I also want to try something and see if it fits me or not. So I'm curious, what do you try to incorporate in your life right now? I mean, from personal part.
Yeah. My most recent one that I have not done a good job of yet, but it's what I'm trying to start doing, is what I'm referring to as more intentional eating.
Hmm.
So right now, often I'm eating, while I'm rushing to a Zoom call or at my desk while I'm working, or if I'm taking a break from work, I might like throw on half an hour of TV to like relax my brain while eating. But I'm always kind of doing something else while I'm eating, or literally in the car on the go, things like that. I've developed what I refer to as a bad habit in that way. And some people might love that. It's, they're killing two birds with one stone, I guess. But a lot of the stuff that you read says that's not good for you, and you should try and like know what you're eating and what's in front of you. There's also a lot of like Japanese principles from if people have watched like that Netflix documentary about blue zones or read about some of the practices of people who are centenarians, like living over 100 years old. A lot of their practices are like better eating. And part of that is eating until you're only 80% full. And obviously, we can't know exactly what 80% full is, but if you're not intentionally eating, and I'm using that term in my own way, but if you're watching TV and eating, or you're working and eating, or you're walking and eating, or whatever, you're not actually like thinking about how full you are or like taking pause. And that's when I find myself like snacking a lot right after. I'll have, dessert after lunch, let alone after dinner, because you're eating stuff that you don't actually need because it's a habit more than it's like a conscious decision to eat that thing or to be that full. So that's something I really need to work on, that I'm kind of focusing on as of late.
And I feel like it's also about the speed of how fast do you eat, because when you are watching something, I feel like you are eating faster and you still have this hunger. But if you like eat by yourself and do it slowly, I think that you are getting full faster.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's something to that as well, for sure.
What do you love the most about small cities?
How small are we talking?
Up to you. You tell me.
Yeah, I live in a city that's about 800,000 people in Canada, but it's far away from many other cities. So it is kind of considered like a small city as opposed to like a village or something. I feel like we have everything that we need, but still calmness to it. I live in a neighborhood that's very close to our city center and still has, big old trees and like walkways where you can walk without seeing a lot of cars, or you can, even walk like down by a river. We have a lot of rivers in our city. But we also have, big concerts and NHL ice hockey team, right? Which is what we care about in Canada. And we have lots of cultural events. We have great restaurants, especially because Canada has people from all over the world that have come and immigrated. So we have like really cool, great restaurants from all different cultures. Um, and so we have all these things, but you can also go do those things like with a vehicle that you can afford, and you can park right out front of these places because parking is not crazy, and all these things. So I think that's what's so cool about this kind of like medium-sized city is that you get kind of the best of both worlds. I'm a big fan of like sitting in a cafe and watching people walk by, maybe like working from a cafe and having that kind of vibe. But the other day I was in London, England, and was on the metro, and it was kind of rush hour, and I was in there just like packed in, like you literally could, like your feet were almost stepping on other people's feet as soon as it would stop and start, and it was like hot as could be, you were sweating because it was packed full of people. And I was there thinking, London's a really cool city, but would I want this on a regular basis, And there's something so nice about not having that. And a minute ago, we were talking about food, but we were talking about practices of people who have these like really healthy lives, and eating is one part of it, but also avoiding undue like stress and anxiety is another part of it. And I just wonder, like in those big cities, if people are adding undue stress that they don't need. I don't know. I love visiting big cities. It's like actually like one of my favorite places to go hang out when I'm not at home. I'm not actually usually going to like little beach towns and stuff that are very quiet. I do tend to go to these big cities because I do have a passion for them, and I totally see great value in them. You get a lot of like, stimulation, interesting activities, but I certainly enjoy like residing in a medium small size city where feel like I have everything I need, but also still really like calm and accessible.
What does your process of exploring a new city look like?
Oh gosh. Okay. So typically I stay in an Airbnb. This way you can stay in a neighborhood that's maybe a little more real. I typically start by finding, where's my grocery store? Where's a nice bakery near me? Where's a cafe I could work at this week? Because typically I'm on, maybe what people would call like a workation, or I'm remote working. So I'm not a nomad, as we were just talking about. I do have a home in Canada, but I do go for extended periods of time to other places. That's my favorite way now to travel. I honestly haven't taken like a real vacation in another city in what feels like a long time, because I have this really amazing benefit of being able to work from other places. And so I'll stay for weeks, if not like a month somewhere. So there is a bit of a different exploration process than maybe someone who has such a short period of time to be able to do so. Whether I have a short or long period of time, though, one of my big tips or like things that I like doing is the very first day or, second day, taking a walking tour that they have in the cities, like Sandemans or some of these other ones have in any big city in the world. Sandemans exists. You can look it up in pretty much every big city. And they have tour guides that they really make sure know their stuff. And they're considered free walking tours, quote unquote, but obviously you should be tipping at the end, the value of whatever they tell you, when at the beginning. But it's free because essentially they want to get you there, and then you tip, but that's really your payment to your guide. And so those free walking tours are so amazing because you can kind of get like a lay of the land right away, understand the culture. Your guide is usually very knowledgeable too. So you can ask them about like, hey, if I want this kind of shopping or this kind of dining, like, can you give me some tips? And they'll also give it to you. I typically do like the historic version walking tour, but there are often also tours you can book, again, almost everywhere that's a big city. You can book a food and drink kind of walking tour too. So that if that's more your vibe, you can do that. And then they'll give you, all the information to kind of get you set up, which is so amazing again, because you've got then like right when you land, essentially, you've got this like lay of the land, and you end up walking down streets and in areas where you wouldn't otherwise have gone so quickly, which then allows you to like maximize your time there. I feel like, how you go on sometimes trips and you find the best place on the last day and you're like, I wish we would have found this sooner. I find those kind of things help you with that a little bit earlier. You can obviously also do a lot of research, but I don't tend to do a ton in advance just because I'm usually quite busy in advance of heading somewhere.
Yeah.
So I kind of try and like pack it all in the first couple days to understand my surroundings because I haven't necessarily done a ton of prep research before that. So yeah, I think that's how I start exploring a new city and then just walk. When I'm gone, I walk so much. I think I even like lose weight every time I travel because it's like you're just walking, walking, and walking. Whereas I come from a city that's much more of a car city, like everyone has a car, it's much more normal to drive around. We don't have the best public transportation. So when you're other places and there's good public transport, you know you can get away with walking and like hop on a tram back or whatever you need. But you end up walking like 20 kilometers. It's like at home, in general, I would say, people when they're at home go, oh, that shopping center is an hour walk away. Of course, I'm going to get in a car or a bus. When I'm traveling, I'm like, oh, an hour sounds like a great walk. I'll probably see some things I haven't seen. Like, how funny our mentality totally changes. Like, all of a sudden, we have all this excess time to walk that we didn't have before. Like, it's even if we're working, like, I'm not talking on holiday days, even. It's quite funny how our mentality just totally changes.
Was there a city where you didn't find Earl Grey tea or matcha tea latte?
Yes. In Italy, all they want to give you is a small espresso. And it's so sad because I'm not a coffee drinker, I'm a tea drinker, as you've just alluded to. And one time, even literally, the guy was like, yeah, we can give you a cup of tea, but it's gonna be in this like plastic cup we have. And I thought he must not like it must be like a styrofoam or something, or I don't know, whatever. I was like, whatever, yeah, it doesn't matter because it was a takeaway, it was takeaway, right? I get the cup of tea in Italy, and it's in like those little like see-through clear plastic like water cups almost that you would use.
Yeah.
And it's in two of them because the first one, due to the hot water, has deformed and shrunk. So they put another one to not. So basically, my like however much I paid for this in euros for this cup of tea was like poison plastic water because it's like melted into the water. So it basically went into the garbage can. I never actually got a cup of tea. So Italy, very hard in a lot of areas, especially the old kind of town areas, to get a cup of tea.
So what did you drink there?
I just start drinking coffee in those situations. I mean, because I'm used to morning caffeine, right? So, but a coffee is a lot of caffeine for me because it's a different kind, right, than tea. So yeah, not ideal, Yuri, but I do drink coffee occasionally in the last like 5 years when I am in these situations.
So, okay, matcha tea latte, I understand, but tell me a backstory of you meeting and falling in love with an Earl Grey tea.
You know what? Actually, my mom drank black tea always. And so you definitely develop these habits from your parents. If your parents are both like heavy coffee drinkers, you'll probably start drinking coffee as a teenager. You know what I mean? Whereas I didn't. I never really got into coffee. My dad drinks coffee, but because my mom drank tea, and I think you like, you follow one of your parents, and tea seemed like a softer entry option into the caffeine world when I was younger. So she drank black tea. This might just be like regular, like Tetley black tea or orange pico or those kind of things. But then, Earl Grey tea is maybe like a slightly nicer version. And so I got into it. And then when you come to the UK, where I happen to be recording this today, there's a lot of very nice Earl Grey tea. And you have a kettle in all your hotel rooms, and you have black tea in all of your hotel rooms. It's much, much more amenable to people like me who are tea drinkers.
Do you ever add milk there?
Yes, I do. I'm a black tea with milk. No sugar. I used to. I weaned off of it years ago.
How did you feel when the flight attendant told you that you were the best dressed on that flight?
These are funny, these things you're finding, Yuri, about me. You know what? That was fun. That was fun. I'll tell you, there's a big backstory to that, actually. So my grandfather worked for Air Canada, a Canadian airline that still exists and is very big. And when we were young, they used to have passes where they could go all the like flying flight passes to fly standby that could go all the way down to the grandkids. So my mom would use it with us, and my parents would use it with us. And when we were flying far, like internationally, for example, that year where we moved to Australia, you were always flying standby. So if people don't know what that is, it's like basically you're just like on a pass where maybe you get a seat, maybe you don't, just whether there's like open seats available on that flight that people haven't purchased, and then they slot you in. And so back in the day, there was much less like upselling for first class than you see now. You know, we always get those emails now.
Mm.
There's a lot less of that. And so if you were dressed nicely, you could potentially get a first class ticket. But even if you were the first on that list, if you weren't dressed appropriately for first class, there were rules. You couldn't get the seat, like you wouldn't even get on the flight, right? So we were taught growing up young to dress nice when we fly. There was literally one time I remember even they had us back up from the counter and peeked over and looked at our shoes. Because if you were wearing open toe sandals or like sporty, like dirty running shoes, you weren't allowed to take that first class ticket, like even for young people. So it was like just distilled into us that you dress nice when you fly. And so then to this day, I do that. I recently took a flight in sporty clothing and was very self-conscious the entire time, but I had to do it based on like my packing because I was trying to pack really light. And I was going somewhere where I was going on a hiking trip. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do this. But it actually made me uncomfortable because it's whatever your habit is, right? Like it was really ingrained in me to dress nicely. So when that flight attendant said that, that was about like a year, like, I don't know, last year at some point. I said thank you and it was quite fun compliment. But I do remember thinking all the way back to this whole backstory. So yeah, it's nice. It feels like the right thing to do. I don't know. And nowadays, women have plenty of big flowy pants that are very stylish. So we don't really have an excuse anymore to be like in sweatpants because we have beautiful pants that still work and still are very comfortable.
Do you have a special flight outfit, like a wedding dress but just for flights?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a few for sure. Like I have a flowy pair of pants. I always have like those same layers. It's always like a t-shirt with a flowy pair of pants where the t-shirt's like tucked in. And then I have a like button down super light layer and a really light scarf because I always find that like if you're cold, a little scarf can really go a long way.
Yeah.
And it's like a silky light scarf and it packs up very, very small. So if I don't need it, it doesn't take up much space in my bag. And the shirt is always one that I can tie around my waist. So it's not like a structured blazer typically because that's harder. Again, unless I need it for work or whatever, then maybe I have also a blazer that I'll have with me. But like a nice blousy shirt that doesn't wrinkle, that's buttoned down that I can throw over top that looks very put together, but is actually just incredibly comfortable. And you can shove it in your bag or you can tie it around your waist if you're running out of room to carry things. Because part of it is like packing very intelligently. So yeah, I think I do at this point have a couple like go-tos. And this is a fun one. I'm only in my mid to late 30s. And for the last 5 years flying, I use compression socks prescribed from the doctor for flying.
Yeah.
Supposedly, if you fly a lot, or even if you just sit a lot, like truck drivers should do this too, or even if you're going on a long road trip. But if you're flying, we should be wearing compression socks even at a young age because the risk of blood clots is actually quite high and a very scary thing. And I have a relatively like young in tune doctor who told me this a while ago and prescribed me them. So if you do have coverage, you can get them covered. And then you can actually get ones that are properly fitted to your leg. Like they literally like measure your calf, measure your ankle, measure the height, and they give you like an actual proper size. So you can buy over the counter ones from like your pharmacy or drugstore. But if you go to the doctor and get a prescription, then they're really expensive, but the cost, depending what coverage you have, it covers a big percentage of the cost. And you can get like very properly fitted ones. I'm actually due to get.
And you always have them for every flight, so it's like long-term thing.
Yeah, and you can get different thicknesses. This is maybe something people don't realize. Like, so if you are often hot on flights, like you can get a really thin, more sheer pair. If you're really cold, typically they have thicker ones and they have kind of an in between. So, and they have different colors also now, like especially if you're going to these places where it's like a, sport therapy kind of place where you're actually getting fitted. So they have like all these options, which is really great because there is sometimes for people like vanity and stuff involved. That's why I always wear long flowy plants, the high socks go like up to
Yeah.
your knee, right? These are like we're talking big compression socks. But honestly, I love wearing them. At first I was a bit like, this is silly or I'm not going to like this, but they're quite comfortable and you feel, and mentally you're doing the right thing. So I think it
Yeah.
like feels calming in a way.
What is your favorite place to come back to?
My home in Winnipeg. Yeah, for the last few years working remotely, like as a remote professional, doing a lot of travel, I've often been asked why I don't just go nomadic. Like, why am I paying for two places at the same time? But I ultimately just have such a feeling of like comfort and safety and relaxation as soon as I come back to my place. Like people often are like, oh, do you miss, you were just traveling? Wow, how amazing. But when I'm at home, I'm so happy to be home. And then when I rejuvenate for the next trip, I'm really excited for that next trip. I think when people are like 100% nomadic, I think it'd be a lot harder. And I have talked to some people that will say this, like it's a lot harder to find that like true peace relaxation because it's just this like safety space. I've had my house in Canada for more than 10 years. So it's my space. I know it so well. As soon as I get home and drop my suitcase down, it's literally this feeling of, that kind of comes over me, which is so interesting because I still love the travel, but it just gives you that real peace.
Is there anything better than reading a book with a cozy blanket and cup of tea?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Well, add in the factor of doing that, reading the book with the blanket and the cup of tea at our family cabin in the woods where you can like see the water and hear the trees rustling, but no other noise because we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's like true peace and relaxation. In fact, it's funny, Yuri, when you ask that kind of question because as much as that's so amazing, I feel like I'm not doing it enough. And so I think that sometimes those questions make you stop and go, next week when I'm back home in Canada, because again, I'm in the UK because I was at a big community event last week here, emceeing or hosting. But I think to myself, I got to make sure that's in the calendar to like not have plans so I can just go out and do that and like reset myself a little bit for a while.
Why do you like reading about three books at the same time?
You've done your research very well, Yuri. Um, Well, I like to read a physical book that's in my hands. Like I don't have a Kindle. I don't want to read on my phone. Like it's so funny because traveling too, people say to me, why don't you have a Kindle or a, something, an e-reader of some kind? Because then you could take, 10 books with you traveling. But it's just not the same as flipping through pages. Like that feeling just gives you something. So I like to read a fiction book that's a physical book that I can have in bed before bed. If I read business books before bed, I fall asleep too fast. So my fiction is before bed. Then I'm in a book club and I'm reading whatever that book is. That can vary like crazy. It's often fiction, but sometimes it's like biographies. And the ladies in my book club are very hip on what books are in style. I do not know this, you're right. I just follow their lead. So they'll be like, this book was on these awards this year and everyone's reading it. And I'm like, okay, cool. What is it called? Like, what am I supposed to read? So I'm usually reading that one, which has like a timeline on it and it's for the book club, but often is amazing because it has me reading things that I would not normally select. We read one recently about a story of if Jesus had a wife before he became the Jesus that we know, before he became, the character that we all are aware of today. Because at that era, men who were about the age he was when he became this, followed popular figure before they would have already been married well before that. So the story was like, but there's not a lot in the history books to tell us what happened before. So it was this like, what if he had had a wife before all of this happened? And then he kind of started pilgrimages and like left her. And maybe that's bad for some people. Maybe they hate that idea, but she did a ton of research, this author, to write this book. But would I have on my own accord gone to a bookstore and been like, yes, I want to read a book about Jesus's potential wife? Like, no, it wasn't in my list of book choices, right? But it was such a well-written novel and I really enjoyed it. And so that's really fun to have that one where people are, there's another group of minds that are helping you pick these books that might not be your number one choice. Um, and then I'm always reading a business book or two at the same time. Sometimes I have a physical one because again, I like the physical book, but I'm really big on audiobooks. So often the book club book will be audio often, and then I'll have a business book on audio as well because I find that I like learning on the go. I like to be going for walks, every day and listening to the business book at the same time because I find there's some kind of like clarity while you're walking and you're kind of like in nature and you're listening to something that you're really like, that's all you're doing. You're focusing on that truly. You're not like busy and distracted at the same time. So walking and listening to a business book, I find great. But then I have to stop and put notes in my phone all the time because it gives me ideas of things that I need to do or need to work on. So yeah, this is it. I end up with like, quote unquote, reading 3, 4 books at a time, but often they're like audiobook for 2 of them, physical book for 2 of them, and it depends on my mood.
I'm currently reading, I guess, 4 books or maybe even 5 books at the same time.
Are you similar?
I feel like I have, I'm reading one paper cover book. Then I have 4 or 5 books open on my phone. And out of them, one is just business book. Another one is like this kind of lifestyle, about this Iceman. The third is a novel. And the fourth is something something in between of business and personal, something like that. And it's so hard for me to switch, because like when I start reading one book, I kind of want to finish this book, but then I'm like, yeah, I really need to switch. Then I'm going to another book. So I'm curious, how do you decide when to switch to what book?
Totally by my mood. Yeah. Like, and how good the fiction book is. Or well, no, how good any of the books are actually. If I'm really into a book, then I read it cover to cover before I move back to the other one, with the exception maybe of like, well, no, that, yeah, it's not true because I'm always listening to an audiobook different from a physical book. So right now I'm reading a very popular new series that like every woman has told me I should read, and they're total fun fiction stuff to read. And so I read the first book at the cabin like in a weekend because it was so good. And like so good meaning like just easy to read, entertaining, right? And it was a paper book that I was like literally looking through. But halfway through that, if I was driving back to the city, I wouldn't go find that on audiobook. I would start listening to, again, like a business book on audio on the drive back from the lake. So I'm pretty much always like book to book, but it'll be mood and then where I'm located, whether I have to do audio or physical, and I only keep the book one or the other. I'm never like kind of switching between the two.
Welcome to the soulmate conversation because I feel like I'm also like totally the same. So I have those books open and then like I'm sitting, okay, I want to read a book and then like what book should I read? Hmm, maybe my mood is for novel, or yeah, now I'm ready to this business book, or
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'll just go with a paper book. So yeah, it's totally on the mood. And I'm curious, talking about books once again, if you start a book, do you always finish it?
No, actually, which is funny. I think like for fiction books and book club books, yeah, because there's a story that you're kind of into. With business books or like personal development, professional development, I tend to kind of come back to them sometimes later because sometimes someone tells you about a book that's way more what you need in that moment. Like I was just rereading Atomic Habits a while ago and I was doing it physical version. And I just kept finding I was so into the topic. Like it was actually very, very interesting. But I found myself like getting distracted by other things often. And then there was a new book that I wanted about like designing your ideal life. And that was what I just like needed at that time. And so, although habits are like a good part of designing your life, but then I thought, you know what, I'm going to come back to that one like when I have when my mindset is more a fit for that. So, and also it's the kind of book where you can just grab like chunks of it kind of to learn about the habit breaking or creating that you're trying to do. So, yeah, I find I jump around. And I also have bought one of those apps now where you can read book summaries, in 10, 15 minutes. Like there's a couple of not Headspace, Headway and Blinkist and a couple of those ones. So I have one of those now too. So if I want to consume a book like that one and I don't get through it, sometimes I just go listen to the full summary in 15 minutes and then I have at least like the basic notes done.
And you can hold a conversation about this book. So,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
what atomic habits do you have?
Ooh, I have a pretty good workout habit, which is like I truly call it a habit. Like it was it was something where I did it at the same time every day, and I didn't used to do that, and I struggled with getting into the gym always. Like I was always a soccer player or football player, depending what country we're in. I'm in the wrong country. I should be calling it football right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But so I played my whole life really competitively, and so I always was in shape with this cardio that I got from soccer. But as soon as I stopped playing, and or even during, I tried at periods of time to go to the gym, but I never like got into it. I found like in the evening it was hard because especially this is a funny comment, but as a woman, if you've done your makeup and you've got like stuff on your face and you're gonna sweat, you kind of need to take it off, right? Like it's bad for your skin, it doesn't feel good. And then also, if you're going somewhere afterwards, like say you're trying to fit in the gym between work and plans you have, now you've had probably your makeup from work. You've got to take it off to work out, and then you got to put it back on to go out, and then take it off again to go to bed. It's quite annoying, actually. This is a funny comment, but it's like it's actually a barrier sometimes. And so I found myself like with these excuses or with these barriers, and so I never got into a consistent pattern. During the pandemic, I learned to work out at home. Bought a couple weights. I got an app that I use. I use the Peloton app and I absolutely love it. I don't have a Peloton bike. I just do the strength workouts and the cardio workouts. And so for those of you in countries where you have that app, I highly recommend. But I found this workout app that gave me a variety of stuff every day. And then I do it first thing in the morning so that there's no like turning around. I haven't put on makeup yet, right? For that excuse. I don't have to drive somewhere because I figured out like enough of a strong workout habit from home. And then it's just like every morning I roll out of bed, my clothes are there, I put them on, I go work out. And then I shower, brush your teeth, shower, and then make a cup of tea and then go to work. And then I eat breakfast a couple hours later, like I take a break from work. So those are all technically habits. Like my habit is get up, go right to your app and do the workout. Then brush your teeth, shower, then make a cup of tea. That's part of the habit routine, right? It's like, there's this thing in the book about stacking habits, like one leads to the other. And then I go to work. So it's like bam, 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 bam. And I have this process. So that's a great habit that I have. I also have some very bad habits, like eating junk food while watching an episode of TV before going to bed. Really bad. That's why I talked to you earlier about intentional eating and not doing that anymore. So, but they're equally just habits and they can be broken and created like in the same way, right? And so, this concept of like stacking habits is a really great one from the book. So say I wanted to implement meditation into my life, which I don't currently do as a habit. I don't currently do it actively all the time. You would want to do something like boil your pot of water for tea that I do every morning. It's already in my routine. And as soon as you hit the boil, you go in the other room and you do a 10-minute meditation, and then you come back and you pour your water for your tea that's now been boiled, right? Like that would be how you can stack it onto an existing thing.
Yeah.
And you really have no excuse because like it's gonna take the water that long to boil anyway and whatever, right? And so it's like you put it into your routine because you're stacking it on top of the shower, meditate/boil, and then drink your tea. So that would be like how you could add something in your stack that you already have.
Is there a habit that doesn't stick no matter how hard you try?
Well, so far, not eating junk food before bed. Well, in the evening, in the evening in general. So yes, so far that one. What else? I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's more.
How
I'll
do you
have to get back
adapt?
to you.
How do you adapt to changes?
Really well, actually. Um, the It was interesting because in the pandemic, people thought, they would be like, how are you doing? Because I'm a very extroverted person who really finds a lot of joy from other people and connecting other people and being around other people and, emceeing and hosting events. Like it literally brings me energy. And so they thought, are you going to be like, how you doing by yourself, But I found it was totally fine. I just changed my habits. I changed the things that I was interested in. I took a painting class and then, just was painting by myself more, something I had never done. I'm able to really like fill my time well. And it's a great question because recently I was just talking to a friend, a mom of a couple kids, and she was saying, one of the things she really hopes to instill in her children is like resilience and adaptability.
Mm.
And today, those are such important qualities because things like, I hate referring to the pandemic again, but like things like that can happen where our lives can totally change. Or even just, someone can break up with you and you didn't think they would, or someone can be mean to you, or you can be bullied, or you can whatever, right? Like we have to be resilient and adaptable no matter what. Like our parents can't shelter us forever, right? This is the angle she was looking at it from. But even from ours, like working environments change all the time. There can be recessions, there can be things where, or you just lose your job for whatever reason, or someone, you get a new boss and things are totally different. You don't like it as much anymore. That adaptability and resilience is how we're going to thrive in anything that we are doing. And I think, we talked a little bit earlier about living in Australia for a year when we were young during like kind of formative teenage years where everything really matters a lot, right? Like emotions are very heightened at that age. And I think some of those experiences really allowed both my brother and I to be very adaptable and resilient people. And so I think we do that by acknowledging the fact that growth is a really important aspect of being a human being, that I have a mantra or like a set of words that I are like in my guiding principles. And those words are family, gratitude, and growth. And growth is in there because we do have to constantly like adapt and change and be better and better. And it doesn't need to be better and better where you're like always aiming for more money or always getting like, more fit or whatever. But it's just like we're gonna age. So how do we age? Like, how do you, still feel healthy while you're doing that? How do you still feel good? Like it doesn't need to be like physical looks or whatever. It doesn't need to be more money, but it's like if we're adaptable, we are going to have more stress-free, like anxiety-free life, which will help us to live
Yeah.
longer and happier lives. And so, like, this makes me sound like I'm perfect. I am like in this way, in that particular way, I am absolutely not. I am resilient, but I still feel a lot of stress and anxiety as a person because I am this passionate individual where like I do feel things. But it's something I work on actually. Like I listen to stuff and read stuff about how to be a more like level person, more level-headed, less stress and less anxiety because I know it's really bad for you. Like there's so many things we've all read about how bad stress can be for your heart, your health, right? Your longevity. So I laugh at myself a lot more than I used to 5, 10 years ago, Like 10 years ago, if I would have like spilt milk all over the floor right before this call, because I was making a cup of tea, let's say, this did not happen, but it has before. 10 years ago, I'd have been like so upset. Like I'd have been stressed coming to the call. I'd have been cleaning up, like really overwhelmed. Today, I would drop that and literally stop, look at it, laugh out loud. Like I'd be like, you're dumb, like as if that just happened and then like send you a message and be like, I want to be 5 minutes late because I need to clean up this milk because I'm a dummy, like and then like do it and come to the call and be like, Yuri, can you imagine what I just did? Right? Like and I think that's just us getting older and wiser as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
but it helps.
Hopefully wiser. You never know. At least we can laugh. I feel like
Yes.
it's a bad thing. So, talking about laugh. So there is one of the previous guests' question. If you were a plant, what kind of plant would you be and why?
I would be I would be a plant. Maybe this is so funny. Okay, I'm just gonna tell you the first thing that came to mind, which is probably not my answer if I had more time. But I was thinking ivy because it can grow like all the way up a side of a building and have a lot of like branches of it, and it can look really beautiful and make a building like more enhanced, but more because of like the way that it grows and spreads.
Got it. And Margot, I really wish to have the sky as a limit to our conversation, but time is a limit. So let's go to rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Day, day or night?
Okay.
Earl Grey tea or matcha tea latte?
Matcha.
What is your favorite color?
Blue.
Usually I ask what is your favorite song, but since you are not listening to songs very much, so what is your favorite podcast?
Right now it is Diary of a CEO.
If you were a superhero, what superpower would you have?
Like immediate transportation, like not necessarily time travel, but like telecommuting, like being able to just like be in one spot and then be in a whole other country without having to fly my way there.
Who do you learn from? Name just one person.
My mother and father, I was gonna say. That's two people. Unfair. My
Kind of
parents,
like fan parents, like yeah, it's
family.
kind of one. Yeah, I get it. So name two people whom I should definitely reach out to and have this conversation with.
Paz Bazarski, if you haven't already had her. And probably also who's the other one that you should have this conversation with? There's so many good people. Um, Ruthie Bauer.
Okay, and ask it forward. It's like pay it forward, but with questions. So ask a question a future guest will have to answer.
Okay. If you could if you could design any festival that was like a big hit, it was gonna like it's a lot of people, it's gonna be a big festival that doesn't already exist, that has something to do with your personality. This is a complicated question. What festival would that be?
Is there one question that I definitely should have asked you but didn't?
I don't, oh gosh. Maybe no, because the questions that come to mind are things that people more commonly ask me. And I think what's so fun is that you ask things that were different than usual.
That's how it works. I really want to get to know you more as a human, like behind the titles. And you've done an amazing job allowing me to do this. So thank you very much for sharing your story and to being open to really talk about you as a human, because I know that you're an amazing community expert. And now I know that you're an amazing human. Thank you very much for allowing me to get this understanding.
Thank you so much for having me today and for all your interesting, well-researched questions.
And yeah, see you in the community world.